In this video, I'm going to talk about a subject that shouldn't be really controversial, but it seems to be. That's astrology. And I'm coming at it from a Christian perspective because I'm a Christian. I think most people have probably heard of the Mazzaroth and how it, tells God's story of redemption. It's the gospel and the stars idea. I don't think that's even a contestable concept, really, but I think there's entirely too much superstitious fear around a lot of these more esoteric topics as far as the Christian community is concerned. The thing to remember is these New Agers, they don't get these ideas from nowhere. Like, the devil can't create anything. He can pervert what God already created. But when you bury your head in the sand and deny things that seem to be plainly evident, you really kind of rob yourself and the people around you of a lot of the fascinating sort of magical aspects of the creation that God is like using to display His glory. You know what I mean? It's like God's trying to have a good time fascinating His kids with the cool shit that He can do, and we get so scared of like accidentally worshiping creation or something. And I mean, that's a problem for sure. Like, whenever an angel revealed itself in the Bible, it definitely was like, do not worship me, and there's that weird crazy interconnection between angels and stars. It's almost like they're one and the same when you read it in the Bible. So I'm not saying that's not a danger or not something to look out for, because you can get caught up in how cool the stuff that God made is, but I just think that depends on how big your perception of God is, because there's nothing here that God didn't make and doesn't have control over. Like in Job, when he says, in the King Jimmy version, he says, when God's scolding Job for being a know-it-all or whatever, he's saying, "Canst thou bind the sweet influence of the Pleiades?" That word influence is really eye-opening to me. It seems kind of weird that, it seems to be saying that the Pleiades has an influence that God can bind. He's basically saying, dude, you can't do shit about the Pleiades. I can. Sounds like maybe the word influence meant something different back in the day, but I doubt it was that different. So that verse alone seems to be indicating that the Pleiades has an influence that can be bound. Not by Job, but by God. In Nehemiah 9:6, he says, "You alone are the Lord, you have made the heavens, the heaven of heavens with all their host, the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that is in them. You give life to all of them, and the heavenly host bows down before you." Here's another thing that weirds me out. Look at this verse, listen to this verse. Isaiah 40, verse 26. "Lift up your eyes on high and see who has created these stars. The one who leads forth their host by number, he calls them all by name. Because of the greatness of his might and the strength of his power, not one of them is missing. He calls them all by name." Why the fuck is God naming the stars? They seem to be rather important. They don't seem to be just trivial things to God. And that's the thing, man. He built the universe with rules in it and mysteries to be sought out and understood. And all it does when you find things and understand them is it just magnifies or intensifies your understanding of how, I don't want to say big, what kind of a being creates something that can influence mankind in a way that you don't even see. Take this very well-known story. A star rises and wise men from the east follow it to a town called Bethlehem, knowing that a king was born there. And when you know what was actually going on with the wise men, they were a priesthood of astrologers in Babylon that Daniel was appointed to be the head of by Nebuchadnezzar, because the dude was so good at astrology, because he wasn't worshiping these stars, he was worshiping God. God is the reason Daniel was so good at what he did, and that's why he was appointed to that priesthood. But those dudes literally, way later, followed a star to where he was going to be born. They'd been watching for that thing for 2,000 years. Daniel, probably one of the most interesting prophets in the Old Testament, he might be the most interesting, was literally an astrologer in Babylon. But he wasn't worshiping the stars, he was worshiping God. That is a that is so much more profoundly interesting than a Sunday morning Christmas time sermon will have you believe. They're just like, yeah, well, they follow the stars there, and they're born to give them earth and whatever. They just like move on, like, yeah, whatever. The cognitive dissonance is crazy. Like, you shouldn't shut your brain off to that kind of stuff. You don't worship creation, but you don't pretend it's not fucking awesome, because it is. Deuteronomy 4:19. And beware not to lift up your eyes to heaven, and see the sun and the moon and the stars, and all the host of heaven, and be drawn away and worship them and serve them, those which the Lord your God has allotted to all peoples under the whole heaven. That is jam-packed full of weirdness, but I mean, first of all, I'm not even totally sure what lift up your eyes to heaven means exactly, given how pervasive night visions are and the crazy shit people experience with angels when they have visions. It says that because they're not meant to be worshipped. I'm not saying you should go get your palm read and you should be quaking in fear when Saturn happens to be in the 4th quadrant of your 11th house or whatever, but I'm saying, like, there's a lot that's been hijacked that we really should reclaim, because a lot of these pink-haired weirdos are taking them, and they're taking some very interesting aspects of God's creation and just using it to boost their own ego. I think we're robbing ourselves of a lot of joy and fascination and wonder. I really do. He says it's the glory of God to conceal a thing and the duty of kings to search out a matter. And I think we're all kings in his kingdom. He's the king of kings. You know what I mean? Tradition is good, but I think it can get in the way. It can stifle growth if it's left unchecked.